All right, so now, yeah, Michelle asked me to record this, so hopefully everybody's okay with that, and we'll continue to move forward with it. Let me also share my screen. And as I said, this is week 1 of 9 that we're going to be doing the Power BI advanced training, advanced data modeling and shaping training. And you guys see my screen now, right? You see the PowerPoint visual?
Yep.
Great. And is that big enough? Do I need to make it any bigger, or can you guys, is it readable?
Looks good to me.
You can read
Okay,
it.
great, great. Okay, so this is 1 of 9. Also, we, with the DFW users group, we have a Slack site. I'm going to paste the invite to Slack in the chat. If you haven't joined us on Slack yet, please go ahead and join us in Slack. And there's a channel. Let me pull this over here. There's a channel named Advanced Data Modeling Class. So we could use that channel if you have questions during the week about the lab. So find that by doing a plus on your channels, and then you'll be able to search for it. And then any questions that you have or whatever during the week when we're not online, feel free to put them there. And I'll also, any links that I put out, I will also include there. So I've already introduced myself. I don't remember exactly how long for 9 weeks this ends, but it's going to be from March 18th forward. A couple prerequisites, which I assume most people have already worked with Power BI. In order to do the labs, you will have to have Power BI desktop. Obviously, you have internet connectivity because we're doing this as an online class. There's a couple files to download, and I'm going to put those into the chat right now. And I will also add them to the Slack channel. So these will be the files you need in order to do the labs. So if you want to go ahead and start downloading them. And then the assumption is that you already have some knowledge, working knowledge of Power BI. They say a level 100. We do have like 40 slides to get through today. Hopefully we'll get through them all. So I may be going a little bit fast, and I might actually skip over a couple of the slides. So here's the course objectives. So basically you're going to get, an above 100 level understanding of what's going on inside Power BI. We're going to get better understanding of the model, right, and what the components and how to produce effective schemas. We'll get deeper into the Power Query M language and the DAX, understanding parameters. We will be working with CSV files and Excel files, which is what's in those downloads. And then, again, further with DAX, especially calculate, because that's all the DAX. Setting up your measures is all considered part of setting up your data model, right? So there's the big component of Power Query and then the DAX. So we'll go through the agenda. So today we're going to run through these introductions and the overview, and work through to get through module 1. And then in all the other weeks going forward, we'll cover one module at a time. And then what I built into our schedule as well is, I think it's after module 3 and after module 5, maybe. I built in an extra review week so that we could just kind of regather on all the modules beforehand. So this way, if you end up missing a week or whatever, you could come back, and then that review week we could use as a catch-up week for everybody to try to bring everyone back to that same point. We did that with the DA 100 study group, and it seemed to work well to have those extra weeks built into it. Okay. If you have questions, I do have the chat up. You could put them there, or you could feel free to interrupt me with questions, because if you have a question, then most likely everybody else does. These ones I'm going to go through extremely quickly. I'm assuming a lot of people have an understanding. Again, I'll I'll put this event evaluation back out towards the end of our 9 weeks. But this is what I'm going to start going through quickly. The idea of, Power BI fits within the entire Power platform, right? Which also includes Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. Recently, you started hearing them talk about Dataverse versus, which is just consolidating a lot of your data over into either data flows, common data models. They actually have common data model entities, which I don't think we cover that here. But a lot of this is all really starting to come together so that they could unlock the value of data everywhere. And, of course, it integrates with Office 365, Azure, Dynamics, if you're using Dynamics 365 or anything else. Why Power BI? So probably all know this already, right? But the desktop itself is free. You do have to have licenses to do sharing up on the portal, up on the service. But that does allow you to do real-time dashboards. It supports a natural language query with its question and answer visuals, and also up on the website, and also have AI insights. So a lot of good AI visualizations have come out within the past few months. Hopefully everybody is looking at those. You could extend it by writing your own custom visuals or your own custom connectors. That's really quite advanced if you're doing that. There are some places that you can kind of get started with that. To be honest, I haven't done it myself, but I've watched a couple videos that talked about trying to get it going very quickly. So, oh yeah, thanks. I just saw that on. Yeah, I could go ahead and share the slides. Let me look back through and make sure there's nothing from Microsoft saying that I can't. But we do download it. I download it from the instructor side, not the student side. Thanks, Alex, for helping answer Eric's question. There's a lot of integration with Excel, PowerPoint, SharePoint, and Teams. Teams actually has its own app that could be put in to help integrate with Power BI. Excel can read the data sets, and you're going to see, it was announced at Ignite, there's going to be a lot more integration with Excel going forward, including the ability, I think you'll be able to put Excel files right up on the service. And I know the Excel Online is going to start refreshing from the data sets automatically, which is going to be a huge thing. So Power BI really does help support bringing in all of your data, making it available to anyone, right? Including the mobile app, so you could get it on your phone, you could get it on like iPads or whatever, and integration of QR codes, right? You could get data everywhere, right, and make it for every single decision. All right, so that was kind of the brief overview. So let's get into Module 1. Okay, so what we're going to cover here in Module 1 with just three bullet points here, right? And this is still really kind of just introducing and making sure we're all at the same level here. I think a lot of it for a lot of people is probably repeat. Okay. So, get an understanding of what is meant by the data model in the context of Power BI. And then the biggest thing, right, is when you're making model decisions, what are some of the pros and cons, the consequences of those decisions? And then also how Power BI is handling data types. This is kind of a nice little flow, right? We see from within our Power BI desktop, we could connect to any data source that has a supported connector. Sometimes you could even connect to other things that may not have a connector, but have like an API, right? Because you could use the web API to do it. I know I use that a lot to produce a report that shows all the different meetup events going on. We could show that at the end if you're interested, because it'll help you find a lot of the different meetup um, classes happening. So you bring all in your data into the Power BI desktop, right, into your PBIX file, and this has to be done on a Windows machine. Um, if anybody's ever asked, can it be done on a Mac? The answer is no, unless you're running virtual Windows on the Mac, right, within a virtual laptop on that, right? There is a way of doing that, but then you're basically in a Windows platform, right? So desktop itself is not supported on the Mac. Um, there are strides to really make the service be a whole lot closer to what's going on in desktop. And I think we'll see strides in that over this year as well. So you get into your query editor, right? Your transform data, your Power Query part of it, right? It's kind of multiple words for all the same things. And you do your data transformations, you prep your data model, and then you use these three views that you see on the side of your report view, the data view, and the relationships view, right? So you use all that to continue to produce your model, right? Do all this. You want to do these two, kind of work from the bottom up here, and try to work your report visuals last. It's always fun to jump in and try to visualize the data, but you really need to understand it first, right? So, and that's kind of what this is running through. This is a good phase for doing that, right? You want to edit your queries, get data, and that's going to be your query, and that's the M language. Um, then as you go into it, you're going to do your model creation after you're getting the data off of transform, and that's where you're going to use relationships and model. And then underneath the model part of it, that's where you'll end up producing new columns or new measures or even new tables, right? That's going to be your enhancement phase. And then finally, you get to what your end user wanted in less than a day, right? Is to, can't you just visualize this real quick, right? But the more time you spend prepping your data, the more scalable this will be, the longer it will last, and the less problems you'll have. Okay. So now it wants me to jump out into demo number one. And that's really pretty simple. It's going to be a lot of what you guys have probably seen before, but let me jump over to Power BI, right? So hopefully this is not the first time anybody has seen this. You have seen Power BI itself. You've seen everything across the ribbons here, going across to different views up here. These are the three, right? Your report view, your data, or a data view, and then relationship view. That one now says model, but they called it relationship over there, right? So you go to relationship, you can see the data that has been brought in, how it relates. There's been some debate about this, the new model setup. I'm going to go ahead and upgrade it because I do like the upgraded look. If you notice now on the upgrade, they've moved where your one to many is and your directional to be on the line rather than closer to the edges. I have seen some debates recently that on Twitter that some people don't seem to like that. Um, so we'll see where it stands. Then you have this type of relationship, right? That is, it's a one to many, but you see the two different arrows, all right, because this is a bi-directional filter. So the filter can flow, in this case, from, let's say from date, from your date dimension through your sales, and this is basically a fact table. Then this will filter back to customer and filter the customers down to do whatever you need to with that. So I think we'll cover bi-directional filters even more in a later module, but just make sure when you're using them, you are using them with caution, and you don't have multiple paths to filtering things, because that could cause ambiguity. This also, I don't know why it has this out here, but there are, can I make that bigger? Sure. Let me actually start zoom in. Oh, I had it. All right, so the part that, right, so what we were talking about is here is the bidirectional filter. Oops, sorry, I'm not great with zoom it right now, so it's not something I've practiced with lately. And it seems to pixelate.
You can use the scroll in the bottom right.
Oh, to make the model itself bigger?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, down here. Hopefully you could see that. I don't know if my whole screen's coming across, but you can make the model itself bigger here. There's another of reset layout. Let me bring this up just a little bit. This reset layout will redraw, and then you could make it bigger, plus minus in this area to be able to see more. Right, so again, this is our bidirectional filter. And we'll get deeper into what everything is doing on this as we go into other modules, right? So this is just trying to get familiar with the tool. Okay, so you'll see, all of this data that's coming in. You're going to be working with a similar spreadsheet. So it's this Van Arsdale actuals, and you'll see there's pretty much a tab per table that you would end up bringing in. So this is the data that came into this data model. Okay. And these tabs down below represent each one of the tables. And so if we looked at the get data, the transform, it should end up pointing to the same thing. I don't think that's what's in this little demo that it wants me to do. Move this part out. This is my first time giving this class too, so I'm trying to make sure I understand what they want me to do as I'm doing it. So I'm kind of learning that part along with you guys. You're my guinea pigs. Right, so once we kind of get our model all set, right, then we have our report visualizations, which in this case currently looks like this. Trying to read what it wanted me to talk about. It wants me to talk about using a sort by column feature in month. So if we could see, let's see, what is it trying to do? It's sorting all of this right. It must not be sorting months right somewhere. But if we look at our table here, we look at our date table, you see it has a month number and a month name. And if we brought that month name on a visual, it would just sort alphabetically, unless we come in here and we do a sort by column. Oh, and they do already have it set, right? So this is how you could see that it's set. It's set to sort by month number, right? Another place you could see that is if we bring month up here and we look at our properties and we look at advanced properties down here at the bottom. Oh, that's funny. I thought it, go back and look at this. Sort by, it's saying it's sorting by, oh, that's month name. And when I look at it here, so month is not being sorted. Month here is the combination of the month and the year, and month name is being sorted by the month number. So that I was looking at two different things. But it shows you could find it by two different ways. I could bring this up and go to advanced here, and you see here it's being sorted by month number.
For month year, I like to put in a beginning of month or end of month column, and then use that to do the sort by.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So, and you can see as you go through the exercise whether that'll be needed or not. Okay, so that's everything on that part of the demo. Knock these guys back down, and then we'll go back through and see. I think a lot of this is still going to be introduction for a lot of people too. So, right, the idea of what is a data model, right? It's a collection of the tables and the relationships, and it's the core piece really of a Power BI report, right? Whether you're connecting to another data model that somebody else produced for you, or you're producing it, you really want to make sure you have a good model, because it'll help you with your visualizations, make it easier to do your slicing and dicing. It'll make it perform better, and it'll go through time, right? Okay, so components, and you guys tell me if I heard a couple other people start using different terms than fact table and dim tables recently. And to business people, those terms seem to make a little bit more sense. The way Microsoft is teaching it in this class, right, is you have your fact table, which sales in this case is a fact table. And your fact table contains primarily keys to other tables and items that you're going to aggregate. So your best fact table is one that is completely numerics, right? So it's going to be keys, especially if you get your keys to the other tables to be numeric data types, integer data types, and then just whatever is going to be summed up. And then, but what I've heard people call that instead of a fact table is a numbers table. I think it was numbers is that they used in the last presentation. And then you have your DIMs that all are going to relate to your fact table. And what I've heard others start calling them is lookup tables. And that sometimes helps people make their transition from Excel to Power BI, because a lot of people in Excel start knowing kind of VLOOKUP and think about looking up, right? It's almost the same concept. You're doing lookups into this other table through that key to find your other columns. Right, so this gets deep. This is what I was just talking about, what they call dim tables, right? And your dim tables are going to have everything that is descriptive. So if it describes if it, in this case, units is kind of what they have in there that looks like it could be summed up, right? If you want to know units by product or product category, that category is in the product dimension. Or units that a customer bought, it's going, within their zip code, how many went to each zip code, that's going to be in the customer dimension. And then from there, we come in and we add our relationships. So we have a column that's on our dimension or our lookup tables that make that row unique. And we're going to relate that over to our numbers table, our fact table, by those keys. And that's what starts giving us our relationship. And that's why it needs to be one to many, right? So there'll be one campaign, could be on many rows within the sales table. And each cell will relate to one and only one campaign. And so that's how our filtering then, when we filter down campaign, it will automatically filter down our fact table. There are other types of relationships, right? One to many is the most common. You will sometimes have one to one. A lot of times when I have a one-to-one, I actually change it to a one-to-many, just because it works better for me. And then a many-to-many. And what it talks about here, and I hope we'll get into it later on, right, is when you do a many-to-many, consider bringing in a bridge table. And we could go, I think that comes up later. I haven't gone through all the modules yet, but there is a many-to-many relationship type, but you want to be extremely, extremely careful in using that. In fact, you'll get all kinds of warnings. I think there's a demo later about all that. If not, we could bring it up again and cover it. But you really need to know what you're doing if you're doing it that way, and you're probably going to have performance issues. Okay. So this is basically, the types of data models that we could have. And what I tend to see people starting off with Power BI is they tend to think and really put together a model that is flat or denormalized, right? Just bringing in that one big Excel report and bringing everything in, every column in from the Excel and leaving it that way and not transforming the model. And then all of a sudden they get to a point where something doesn't work all that well. And then they start trying to move on to the next type of model, which is the star schema. So the star schema is really what Power BI likes the most. And I might need to pick this up a little bit because we got, I think, almost 20 more slides in about 20 minutes. So, and then from there, you might look at a Snowflake schema. And that's where you're going to have some other tables kind of joining in. So here's what I just talked about with a flat or a denormalized schema. It could blow up really quickly. It's not going to compress as well. It's highly inefficient. So then you start getting into your basic data modeling to produce your star schema. And the reason that it's called that is it looks like when you arrange the tables in this way, people imagine it as a star, right? So you have one thing in the middle and you got your points on the outside. And the fact is always on the many side. Then to get into the snowflaking, like in the case of this model, the geo dimension is a snowflake off of customer. And so you may want to do that for some reasons. I have a couple cases where I use snowflaking, but I do try to avoid them when I can, because you have to start thinking about how your filtering is going to flow all the way through to your fact tables and what you're going to filter here. Okay. Let's see what we're talking about here is, right, you could bring in multiple fact tables, right? And there's, in what you're going to download, there's two different spreadsheets that we'll end up working with through the time of this class, right? The sales, which is the actual, and then the budget. And the budget is at a different granularity than the sales. Right. So obviously the budget doesn't go down to customer, right? We could see they added another table here that's called the category segmentation table. And that's what budget is down to, that, and also date. I've been at some places where the budget isn't even brought down to a date. It's only brought down, well, and this is same month. So we'll have to look as it gets closer to what they actually build the relationship off of. Sometimes you don't even build it off of the date, you build it off of something else here. So think about your granularity as you're bringing things in, and then you're going to have to handle that through other techniques that we'll talk about. A lot of times those are their measures, your DAX formulas. Okay, so the different model types, right? And what you might end up connecting to. They talk about a lot connecting to a SQL analysis services and a SSAS tabular model. When you do that type of connection, a live connection, you're only going to see that report view. And that's changed. I guess this hasn't been updated since they did the release, even though this was updated in December 2020. That has changed because in public preview, there is the ability to do direct query against analysis services that's hosted in Azure, so Azure analysis services, and Power BI datasets. Power BI datasets are really just analysis services hosted up in Power BI. So you actually end up with the reports view and the relationship view now. And you're able to see the relationships of what you're doing live connect to. And if you have the preview turned on, you could actually change that to be what the next one is direct query. Oh, okay. I think this is talking about if you, now that I reread this, this is thinking about if you're connecting to SQL analysis services like on-prem, right? That's on your own server. Here it is talking, they did update this, is if you're doing Azure analysis services, they actually have this icon incorrect. You're going to see the report and the relationship views, right? So this first one and this last one. You won't see the table view here. When you, well, that's on a live connect to it. When you change it to direct query, you might end up seeing all of this. And then when you're doing import, which is probably the most common that people do when they're producing their own model, right? That's when you have all three. That's what we'll be working with, is importing like from Excel. Hopefully you all know how to do your connections. So this is just showing that you could put in your server, put in your database, whether you're going to change from import to connect live once you have something like that available. If you're connecting to something that supports direct query, in this case, they're showing a SQL database, you have the direct query option there, right? So direct query doesn't bring the data into your model. It's sending SQL queries or whatever those queries support, and it supports composite modeling. You do still set up your relationships and some DAX. There are some things that are not exactly that are not supported the same way as if you're doing import. So if you're going to direct query, just you might want to look up and be aware of that stuff. Hopefully you know how to set your, we're talking about storage mode still. So this is live connect again. What's appropriate, right? So if your organization is already doing a lot of analysis services, has mature models, or you have a group that does that for you, or you're putting those models out as you're the one doing it, and you're doing it into Power BI, and you're doing a good best practice of separating your model from your report. You may have people doing report development that's doing live connect to a Power BI model that's fitting on Power BI Premium, or even just within Power BI Pro, depending on how you have it licensing. There was a good blog post, because this last line is Microsoft's direction. There was a good blog post just the other day that Premium is a superset of analysis services features, right? So they're getting to the point that supporting Power BI data sets up on Premium has all of the features of analysis services and more. And that's definitely Microsoft's direction, is to have people continue to move to Premium. Thanks for somebody just put that blog post out there. That's the exact one I was talking about. Whether or not you want to choose import or direct query, right? So import is usually your first choice. It's all going to be in memory. There are no DAX limits. But if you have extremely large data volumes, and we're talking billions upon billions of rows, really, you get into a couple million and things are really still pretty good. You have to know how to look at your data model size to try to figure that out. I haven't had a lot of reason. I work with a pretty big set of clients, and most everything we do is off of import mode. But if you get extremely large, or you need to get closer to real-time access, then you're going to get to your direct query. You know, you already have a good investment into a data warehouse, or other setup. If you have a multi-dimensional cube, or connecting to SAP HANA, those are common reasons. Sometimes there's reasons you don't want to have data brought into the Power BI service. They've done a lot lately to allow you to bring your own keys and support other type of reasons for protecting your data. So just make sure you know what your corporate policies are. So a rule of thumb is your data is going to compress 5 to 10 times. And there are techniques you could use to get it really up to this 10-time compression. So does that mean that you really have large data? Well, if you could get it to compress quite a bit, then it's not all that large, right? Premium has a feature called large data sets, and it compresses it closer to this 10 times. And even if you have a small model, it seems to perform better that way. And then, like we were talking about, there are some limitations when you use direct query. So for example, time intelligence is a DAX limitation. Okay. Kind of pause here. I've shown we got 20 minutes. See if there's any questions. I appreciate what people are putting into the chat and helping things out there. And looking at what their demo 2 is, their data modeling is stuff that we kind of already covered during my demo 1. So I think let's go ahead and continue on with our slides. And we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on within the training itself, right? So what really gives the compression, right, is the columnar database that they set up. And that's the technology. You'll hear, if you follow the SQL BI guys, Marco and Alberto, they'll call it the VertiPack engine. It's that VertiPack engine that Microsoft bought into years and years ago, I don't know how long ago, but they've been just really moving forward with it. And it's the column storage, which is different than, like, if you're familiar with a SQL database, or even when we're looking at that Excel spreadsheet, thinking about every row being stored separately. In the model that Power BI uses and analysis services use it, each column is stored separately. So this gives it a way to compress a whole lot more. You could do compression on this side better than you can on the row-based side. And that's what really gives it its speed, and makes it much better suited for analytics. I think it's in this presentation because I saw it referenced the other day, right? The cost of the joins is cheaper than the cost of not compressing. So by doing the compression, it becomes a whole lot faster. The other thing that they do is everything is stored up in memory, which is memory is fast. And typical laptops, they talk about having only maybe 8 gig. I know I run 16 gig on mine. Some people that do a lot of Power BI stuff. In fact, I'm starting to look into whether I'm going to buy a laptop that has 32 gig or whatever. Because I work on some pretty big things and I like to have more and more memory, and there's more stuff taking over it. So We'll get a little bit more into how it's doing its encoding, right? So again, kind of thinking through what's on here. So it does things by making hash and dictionaries within everything. So what this is kind of talking about is if we're looking through on the color, when it's storing red or it's storing blue here, it could set it one time and then just know that it's on, it's repeated down 4 times or 3 times in this case, right? So this is a good way for it to be able to do its compression even on a large number of rows. Right, and actually in the you're right, it's only going to have in its dictionary these 3 values, and then it's going to know where those 3 values are used, and it can keep a run list of how many times it's used on each row and stuff. So dictionary encoding is talking about, like, for the color column, it's good to do that, but it's going to be bad for something like the sales ID, right? If we look real close at this sales ID, you see it's changing for every single row, right? So a dictionary encoding is not going to work very well.
And Kevin, this is on, just to be clear, it does that on every single column. It doesn't analyze it to determine if it's a good candidate. It just does it regardless.
Right. This is it. It makes the decisions behind the scenes on whether it's going to use dictionary, which is what we're talking about, or hash. And it does it based upon looking at it does it for every single column. So maybe at one point during this class, we'll bring up the Vertipack engine metrics, right? In which I could show you exactly where you could see that in the external tools. Right, but this is what I was talking about is it could assign integers rather than keeping these text values. It sets up this dictionary, and then it stores. That's interesting. It doesn't have anything here.
Well, I guess it's the gray column to the left is what it stores, right?
Yeah, so it could store this rather than the long text, right? So that's a good compression technique. And this is what I was trying to talk about, is the run length, right? It's very powerful as to, when data is sorted, because it could even know that this is here repeated 4 times. So this is trying to give us an example of the compression. The dashboard in a day class, I wonder if they copied this from the other one. I wonder if they meant to change this. It totals up to 456 meg, almost 457 meg. But when they bring it into the model, it compresses down to just 59 meg, right? So that's almost 8 times. So it makes a much smaller footprint in memory. And that's also why it's very important to set up your star schema, because by having those different entities, it's able to evaluate those columns at a different independently, and it will compress them a whole lot better. Okay. So we've seen this before, right? Kind of back to our reset to what our phases are. We get in a little bit into the data types that Power BI supports. So you have your numeric data types, your decimals, and then there's 2 different on decimals, right? Your fixed decimal number, and this is talking about, it'll get into floating point stored as an integer. You do want to be careful if you get to have things to be too many decimals, places or too much precision because it will change it to a floating point. And that can end up having some problems. Sometimes you can't avoid it. But I know, like, as we hopefully later we could talk about where we do best practices on the data model, again, using tabular editor, using another external tool, and it will call out whether you're using floating point and suggest you try to move away from it. The Boolean, right, true, false, that's considered a numeric data type. Then you have your date times. So there's date, there's time, and then there's date time together. If you bring in your data, and I just had a model that I'm working with, I think we have maybe 10 different dates that we're managing for this environment. If I brought in all the dates and I have times with them and I store them as just one column, I get much worse compression than if I separate them into two columns. Because especially I'll have a lot of dates, right? But then I may have only a couple times because they're keeping things like open, close, stuff like that, right? So it's going to be very common of what time that is. So this thinking about how the engine compresses, what we just talked about, I could get a much better compression ratio because I have a better number of unique times by separating it out. So I do separate them out a whole lot. And then if I need to display it, I can produce a measure to bring them back and display them out at that time. And then we have other data types, right, which text is very normal. And then any, and it talks about try never to have this in your model. Bad things can happen, right? So set your data types. And where I find that the best place to set your data types is in the transform. So your Power Query. Do it there, and then everything else in Power BI will keep it and respect it. So that is definitely your best place. And then go back and set your formats, right? Whether you want currency or a percentage on your numerics, or in my case, the dates that I'm displaying, I'd set a particular display format to have an abbreviated month, an abbreviated day, or I'm sorry, yeah, the day, because we do the day of the week on there. We do the day of the week, the month, right? And then the day and the year. And we want that in a certain way. So we set our format on those, excuse me, on those. Hierarchies. So Power BI will automatically generate hierarchies for you when you pull multiple things onto a visual, but you could also create your own custom hierarchies. And that's a really good practice, especially for driving your end report consumers into using things a certain way so that they know how they're put together, right? So this is showing state, city, and zip. I want to go back a little bit to this, right? Power BI for dates will automatically generate date hierarchies. The best practice is don't use them. Do your own. There's an option in Power BI desktop if you're not familiar with it, and I suggest that you go back and you set it as your overall options to say do not use the auto-generated dates. It will bloat your model if you have multiple dates in there. You're better off using a practice of a common date table and setting it up each time, because it will. There's been case studies, blog posts written that people show just by turning it off, they've reduced the model over 50%. Wow. Where it is helpful is if you're just doing some really quick hit on analyzing some data, then you might want to keep it because you just, want to be a little more efficient. But once you take that to the next level, turn it off, produce your correct date table. That's definitely a pro tip. Okay, and then we covered earlier the sort by column. So the column has to be within the same table. And month number is a very common thing to be sorting by, right? Because otherwise the month name will sort alphabetically and it really won't look like right to your consumers. So you want to definitely try to set that. And then as somebody else was saying earlier, they set it a certain way for, for when they have like a month and a year combined together. I've also seen now some techniques with the better formatting that has come out within this last 6 months or a year. And I think it's the Italians have showed that they sometimes duplicate the date and then just turn the format on for like the abbreviated month and year. And then on the visual, it acts like that date's down, there the whole time. And actually allows you to then kind of project it out a little bit more. And it will aggregate by that. So it's an interesting technique. And so both columns must have the same number of distinct values when you're doing this, or you will receive errors. Aggregations, right? So interactive. I'm trying to understand what they're trying to say here, right? But I think we've all kind of used aggregations before, right? That's going to be your sums, your average, your things like that. But that's really what you're trying to report on. And so we'll get further into this in the next few modules, right? And it looks like I got about 2 or 3 minutes to respect the top of the hour, which is good. But yeah, when you're using aggregations, it's going to perform better, right? Because you have less amount of data that's coming out, or to your actual report, and it's going to give you the nice graphs that you want. So, all right. So that's.
I'm sorry. There was something. It's tickling a memory about aggregations where it was only loading. Like you would tell it. This was one of those videos I thought where you would tell it, I'm only going to need this at the month, like summarize at the month level, and it would only load it in already. Do you remember a video? And then
yeah, here I think you're right. There's when you get into using import and direct query together, what they used to call dual mode, now they're also calling composite models. You could import, or you could have direct query to a very large table and then set up an aggregation table that's imported. And then you may reduce the granularity on that. That's another type of aggregation. Here, I thought they were kind of, but I think you're right. I think here, the aggregation, and they don't have anything in the notes here. The aggregation is using that type of composite model to have an aggregation table that say you don't bring it down to the customer level, right? And you just want to see it by date so you can sum things up. But then when you bring customer onto the visualization, it's going to change over and go to the direct query, send that to the back end, and produce more. So yeah, you can balance your query performance on that. So thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, and Alex pointed the link out to that. So
yep.
Thanks, Alex.
All right. So we've hit the top of the hour, or pretty close to it. We're about a minute or so away. So your guys' assignment between now and next week is to do the Module 1 lab. So you should be able to open up a new Power BI file using the 2 Excel files as your data sources, bring those in. And there should be instructions in lab 1 of your student handout. And we'll all grade them next week. All right. I'm surprised we actually made it through 40 slides within the hour. That's great.
Hey, Kevin, it's Michelle. You did great. I thought that pace was just fine.
Good. John, let me repost the links to the student download. I believe it's this one. So these are the 2 downloads that you'll do. And the lab should all be within that. I saw somebody else said that they had issues with Slack.
I got Carl in. He's in now.
Okay, thank you. And as I said, you know, I keep Slack up on my computer all the time. So if, you know, if you have questions throughout the week, just feel free to ping me in there and we'll go from there. All right, I'm going to stop the recording if I can.